This episode is part of a series concerning trans individuals' relationships with religion. The stories and opinions presented in this series belong to the individuals interviewed and are here to provide insights. However, while we are attempting to get a variety of people from different backgrounds and views, these stories and opinions should not be taken as blanket statements for any entire community. Remember, it is always better to ask than to make assumptions. If you're interested in hearing more of these stories, please check out the rest of the series. Thank you. Welcome to the Trans Field Guide. To start with, please introduce yourself.
So I'm Beck and I'm a mental health practitioner in the Fort Worth area.
My name is Diana.
Hello, I'm JD, and I go by they, them pronouns, and I am one of the board members for Transcendence International. I am also a licensed clinical social worker for the state of Texas.
Hello, my name is Nicholas.
What religion were you raised with, if any?
Yeah, I was raised in a very strict Catholic home, very traditional Catholic home. I mean, we went to church every, Sunday or Saturday evening. Went to any kind of holy day of obligation according to the Catholic Church. My brother and I were heavily involved in what we would call our Sunday school education or continuing ed for young kids. So it wasn't just like a twice a year kind of Catholic or just saying we're Catholic because of family or whatever. Our family practiced what it said to do with regards to going to Mass.
I was raised in a church, in a fundamentalist Mormon church, sort of like the FLDS, but not them. And also simultaneously, I was a member of the LDS church.
My parents were Mormon, but didn't specifically raise me as Mormon, so kind of agnostic at first, but then some of the Mormon missionaries got in contact with me because I grew up in Salt Lake City, Utah, so lots of Mormon missionaries everywhere. And so I became active in the LDS church when I was young. So from the ages of like 7 or 8 to around 12, I think, 12, 13, somewhere in there. Stopped before I became a deacon in the church. So that's the closest to being raised in one, and then went more.
So my dad's side of the family is Catholic, and my mom is Methodist. And when I lived down with her in Bristol, I went to the Methodist church down there.
What religion do you follow currently, if any?
I don't really follow any specific religion currently.
I'm no longer Christian at all. I'm now an atheist.
So for me, not a specific religion. I am kind of vaguely Taoist. And Taoism itself is only vaguely a religion. Well, no, it definitely has very religious aspects to it. But at the same time, one of the core tenets of it is if you're seeking the way, then you're on the path in your own way. So that's why I say vaguely Taoist, spiritual.
Now that I live here in Stephenville, I've started going to the Episcopal Catholic Church. That's right across the street from my house. It is a lot more lax than, I don't want to call it the mother religion, but Catholicism, since it has the subgenres, there's Roman Catholics, and then there's the Roman Catholics, and then there's these people. Listen, everybody who talks about Roman Catholicism is Roman and then Roman, because it's bad. You have the ones who are this is what it says, this is how to follow, and it's this is the only way you can do this, and it's all right, cool, whatever.
What caused you to switch from the religion you were raised with to the religious views you hold currently?
Yeah, I think, when I was younger, even throughout high school, I really followed Catholicism. I believed in what I was being told and what I was because what I was being told at Mass was also being affirmed at home. So that's where a lot of our values and morals in my family system came from. We're in direct relation of Christianity, and more specifically with what the Catholic Church said was right and wrong, and how you treated people came from, sayings that were read out of the Bible and things like that. And so even in high school, when I started questioning a little bit, I still went to mass with my family because that was expected. I did struggle because I knew at the time that I was not, heterosexual. I was identifying as a lesbian at that time. And even though I didn't come out with that information to a lot of people, I really struggled within my religion about what that meant for me. And then as I went into my college years, I actually got really involved with the Catholic organization on campus because it was a way for me I felt different at Baylor. I went to Baylor University, so I felt really different there anyways because of who I was and with my sexual orientation identity at that time. And so I knew I couldn't come out there because it wasn't safe because, Baylor has a policy, and I believe they still do that. You can be kicked out of school for being gay. And so it was scary. So I leaned towards another group that was considered other on campus. I know it seems kind of funny, but like with Southern Baptist being the religion at Baylor, being Catholic was seen as other. And so I was able to find a group of people as a support system where I was heavily involved in that organization because it was off campus, but there was a huge group of us that did a lot of things together and like-minded. I mean, I still believe in, some of the things that the Catholic Church or just Christianity about being kind to, to love one another and to be kind to each other and things like that. And so, those things I could get behind, maybe not so much specific doctrine. But because of that, I really did study Catholicism because I would have a lot of Baptist friends or Christian friends at Baylor who would say, you're going to hell because you're Catholic. And I thought that was an odd thing to think of because I was like, I'm going to hell because I'm gay, not because I'm Catholic. But that's a whole nother, I don't believe that anymore. But at the time, I was like, I don't understand. And so I studied Catholicism to really figure out where I stood and what I believed. And what I liked about the particular priest that was over the church for the Catholic students is he really told us to go out and question and to seek education. And so I think that's a little bit unique in the Catholic Church is that they do want you to go out and find answers to things and to question and all that good stuff. And so I was able to do that. And however, I did feel like I couldn't be out in who I was and be Catholic. I knew there would have to either come a day where I completely denied my sexual orientation to be Catholic, or if I embraced my sexual orientation, that I could no longer be Catholic, because those things don't go together. And so they didn't, even back in the early 2000s, there was, you couldn't be both. It wasn't accepted. And so, I sought guidance through, my priest and other spiritual leaders in the Catholic Church, and they would tell me that I was, sinning in that way, and I couldn't reconcile the two. So I eventually, at one point I thought I would actually. This seems funny to me now, but at one point I thought I would become a nun just because I knew I couldn't live a celibate lifestyle and not being Catholic and living a celibate lifestyle. So, and I knew I couldn't marry, and I knew even at that young age that even if I was to marry a man and have children and stuff, that wouldn't be fair to that person. And so I didn't want to fake it in that way, so much so that I would, hurt somebody else in the process. And so, I guess as soon as I really reconciled that and that I didn't, becoming a nun wasn't something for me, and it didn't even resonate in my identity because I was at that time in my undergraduate years, I started feeling more, masculine and more trying to question my gender identity a little bit more. And then I went to San Antonio for school and actually went to a Catholic school university down there, which is where mostly the Christian schools down in San Antonio are Catholic. And I actually stopped going to mass. I stopped, because I was coming more and more comfortable with being queer, and knowing that I was happier living my true, authentic self than being in a religion that didn't accept me and that I would have to be quiet or closeted, at least at Mass. Like, I could be out and open in the community, but at Mass, I couldn't, I wouldn't be married in the church. I wouldn't be able to baptize children in the church. And for me, at that, especially that young age, and thinking I may have family, I may want to get married someday, those were things that were really important, that a religion would support. Whatever religion I was a part of would support those kinds of things. And so for me, I, have really pulled away, and since then have really pulled away. And I've tried other religions and, to try things on. I've gone to non-denominational. I've gone to very affirming Christian churches for, the LGBTQ plus population. They just don't feel right. And I think that's, for me, I do like there is a beauty to me about Mass and about the way Catholics do things. And I think because that is a part of tradition for me and my family, and to do anything different just doesn't feel right either. So, I'm in this place where I feel like through my development that my spiritual development is more spiritual. It's more about what do I do to feel that spiritual side of myself, and it doesn't involve religion for me. It involves things like connection with people. It involves things about service to others, or it involves things like riding my bicycle out in nature, or sitting out and hiking and enjoying the environment around me, taking that time to be grateful for things. Those are things that bring me peace and feeling sense of grounding than any religion ever has. So
I had a crisis of faith in high school, and I prayed for God to show me, if the one church was true or if the other one was true. And I was in the bathroom shaving, and I got a very loud no in my head. Like, it was, nothing audible. I just this very specific no. And I'm like, wait, what? And so I was like, okay, I guess that's the answer, that neither of them are correct. And so for there, I had a friend invite me to a church camp, and I went, and it was for a Pentecostal church, and I joined that group for a while. After a couple of months, I moved on from them, and ultimately I was at work, and this girl came in, and I thought she was flirting with me, and then she invited me to church, and I'm like, oh, okay. So I went to church, and they were doing a park church service, in the Sugar House Park in Salt Lake City, and it was a lot of fun, and I kept going to church services, and I ended up staying with that church for several years. That's where JD and I actually first met, is in that church. And then after a while, that church had a schism, and I kind of stuck with it, kind of checked out another church, and then moved over to that other church. That didn't really resonate with me as well, so I was kind of in this limbo. During that, somewhere in that, JD and I started dating, and then together we checked out another church, and it was a Holiday United Church of Christ, and we really loved it. Made some great friends from there. We were there for a couple of years, maybe, yeah. And then over time, I just started feeling like I didn't really believe in Christianity anymore. It was right about when the Westboro Baptist Church activity started to really pick up, and it raised a question of, if they are Christians, then what does that say about God? And how would God allow this to happen in His name? And then from there, I was just kind of kept questioning, and ultimately I realized, okay, I don't believe in the Christian God anymore, but I still felt like there might be something. And then over time, I just have really just felt like there really isn't anything supernatural. Excuse me. So I now identify as an atheist, and
starting out not religious. It's kind of in my personality to be constantly seeking new truth, new wisdom that's out there, and so I'm one of those intuitive, big picture types, and so not everything for me is cleanly explained by science, or at least science as we currently understand it. So it fits in my perspective that there's something bigger that's out there. And so introducing that in my life was first Mormonism, and the idea of faith and the power of faith. But it was still a major part of my life. And in my upbringing, that science and logic incredibly important, and so some of the inconsistencies there drew me away from that, but still had that intuitive sense of something bigger is out there. So in the transition from high school to college, a friend invited me to that church where Diane and I first met. And that one was first built out of questioning and seeking, which was exactly what I was doing. And that was kind of the foundation of my journey, to keep on questioning, to keep on seeking, and when I need to, make the leap of faith when I don't understand everything, to not get stuck, but instead to keep moving forward. And then if I learn something new, then I incorporate that into what I know and believe. That didn't work out so well for that particular church. Well, no, it worked out really well in many ways. There were a lot of issues that came up with that church, and fortunately, I was kind of insulated from that. There was just some drama with how leadership worked there, and how it could sometimes get legalistic, and with the leadership that I had when I first joined, it was very much, humbly seek truth. Just before those leaders, and when leaders changed again, I found out that the general trend of that group of churches, even though it was technically like an independent church, it had sister churches that it split off from and then rejoined, etc. And they had a much more rigid definition of what their members were supposed to believe and supposed to say, and rather than like, here is my understanding, and we're trying to understand this together. It is God has answered my prayers, and this is exactly what you're supposed to believe. And if you don't believe in this and you don't follow my lead in this, you're not being a true Christian. And that wasn't the church that I had originally joined anyway, and that wasn't the promise that I had made to God. And during all of that, I was going through a bunch of life changes with my career. I was trying to really figure out who I was and who I was going to connect with. Things kind of exploded with my family at that time, and just a lot of the existential questions of who am I, how am I supposed to be happy, how am I supposed to live a purposeful life. And during that time, I reconnected with an old friend from high school who came out as trans. And it blew my mind. So throughout being part of that church, even though it preached that that homosexuality was a sin, I was still very open about my sexual orientation. I identified as bisexual at that time. It was the best term at the time. and I still found it really important to not be bigoted, etc. I was very much, this is my path. If you want to join me on that path, then this is the path I'm going. I didn't try to alter other people's paths unless they wanted to just join me on mine. So I reconnected with that friend at Pride. Even though I was attending an anti-gay church. And what I had understood to be sin at that point was something that was just inherently unhealthy for you, that was going to be somehow destructive. And this person who I cared about so much and who I knew had struggled so much, now starting to transition, I could not possibly tell him that what he was doing was bad for him. Just, it was so plainly a good thing for him. And I just could not call that sin. And that started this whole cascade effect of all of the assumptions I had made. It's like, if this is no longer true, then this next thing is no longer true, and this next thing is no longer true, leading to gender is arbitrary. Because throw into the mix of all of that, I was also incredibly attracted to him. Had been before the transition too, but it was just this whole question of what does it mean if I am really drawn to this person who I conceptualize there as being born as female, but so it's would that mean that God would call this a straight relationship if we were to even I hadn't even asked the person out, but it was just would it be a straight relationship? Would that be okay? But clearly this person has this male soul. So then would that be a gay relationship? And why the heck would that matter? Especially since I thought gender roles were kind of a weird thing anyway. That was another one of those things that I followed along with, but it was always seeking why the heck would this matter? Not realizing that was my own disconnect with gender roles to begin with. But yeah, that was definitely a turning point for me, just to see someone who was just so very healthy in expressing, in being, and rediscovering who he actually is. And that gave me permission to start investigating that again for myself. And I had to go back to my promise to God was to keep on seeking. And when I find new information, I need to integrate that. And so I wound up leaving that church. In the midst of that, Diana and I began our relationship. Found an open and affirming church. Diana left, when shifted on her journey to atheism, while I shifted into my journey into just agnosticism / kind of Taoism, somewhat Buddhist themes in there. The church actually participated in a conference. It was something like a queer spirituality conference, which was also really important for me, where we got to investigate what's our concept of what was the question? What is the personality of God, or what is the character of God? And how do we actually relate to that? So not a system of rules, but how do we conceptualize? Just how do we conceptualize this being or entity that we're supposed to have some sort of relationship with? That helped me to accept a much more abstract way of being with my spirituality and my journey towards being a more whole person.
I would have to say it's just the more relaxed, because there's no strict way of doing stuff. Like if you just want to go, you want to experience God and not get to know him, but like be there in his presence, there's no like guide you have to follow. You can just be like, I want to hear him, I want to like feel him. And so like you go and you sit, and yeah, it is relaxed because you can kneel if you want to, or you can sit, or you can stand. It's just how it's. I don't want to say it's kind of like a Save a Lot where you can like go in, get what you need, do it how you want to do, and you can leave. But like, however you feel comfortable being in his presence, it's fine. And honestly, I have my moments where I'm just super just lazy and be like, all right, I'm gonna wear jeans and I'm gonna wear a shirt and I'm gonna go, because it doesn't matter.
Do you feel that your views on the religion you were raised with have differed since discovering your gender?
Yeah, I think in a sense, I feel like that. I think a lot of religions are so narrow-minded and don't really take in fact of like today's time and what people are facing in today's world. And I think through my journey and my struggles and the lack of support I've gotten from a lot of religious people. I won't say spiritual, but religious people. It makes me question, and it makes me realize that I don't know. I feel like it's a support for a lot of people and it brings them peace, but through my journey and who I am, it's brought me more pain and heartache than it has peace. Or like I can't even step into a church anymore because it brings back painful memories. So for me, there's more of a grief and loss when I think about Catholicism, and I feel about just how many people they turn away by their such rigid belief systems, not just in the Catholic Church, but just in religion in general, that there's a lot of people suffering that could use their support, that, don't feel like they're living the lifestyle that that particular religion wants them to. So I don't know. I think for me, a lot of it is, how do I separate my family's culture and tradition from the church? And a lot of it's hard because a lot of what we do, involves a religious holiday, or it involves, some kind. I mean, my parents, every time I go see them, they talk about spirituality and religion, and who they vote for and who. I mean, it's I can't get away from it. So I don't know if that really answers your question. I just, it's hard for me to think about religion because it brings a lot of pain to me. And I just see, like, I think there's just, for me, it's just really hard because I see a lot of really good people in that are a part of religions and very conservative, and I see some of the good they do, but they also do a lot of hurt. And that's hard for me to wrap around. And they do the hurt in the name of, their version of God. And, and so it makes it okay for them to be able to be mean or to, not to exclude people. Like, I think that's where I have a hard time to wrap my head around a lot of it. So again, I'm not saying every religious person's like that, but as a whole, that's my experience.
I feel like this one's tricky because as far as the Fundamentalist Mormon Church, I don't know. My view of them hasn't changed because of gender, but because of becoming more atheist. And so that one, nah. The Mormon Church has kind of waged a war on transgender. So I feel like my view of them through the transgender lens is based on their activity over the past few years. And so it's really weird. Now, the church that JD and I were in, I think that one would be more, my view of them has changed because of discovering my true identity, figuring out who I am. And that one, I know they would not have approved. In fact, I knew other transgender people who had come into the church, studied with them for a short time, and then they were not willing to not be transgender, so they were asked not to continue or until they were ready to give that up. And now I have a much better understanding why that would be. So yeah, so that one, looking back at how they reacted to transgender people before, I can definitely say, yeah, I think they were definitely in the wrong.
I'm looking back and I'm trying to get my head back in that headspace to try to remember what it was like way back then. And yeah, just from that lens of gender. And again, I wonder how much of it is harder for me because I didn't relate to so many things based on gender for the longest time. It was just still, it's like, oh, okay, so boys go down this path, and they tell me I'm supposed to go down that path. All right. So it just seemed like that part still feels as strange to me as back then. I think it's more the people and how I view or how the relationships with the people in each stage of my life with the different churches that I was a part of shifted. Where some of it, it's just faded. I don't really keep up with anyone from back from my Mormon days. Like, there are people back in Salt Lake City who I know are Mormon, but that just winds up being this background thing. With the fundamentalist Christian church that we were a part of, that one, the people more actively disengaged with me or tried to call me out as a sinner or for following a, I can't even remember how they put it, something like a lying church or whatever like that. So sadly that became more adversarial. It was just sad. Where one of the things I had loved so much about that church was that it had originally, to me, felt so warm and welcoming and kind, and in the end was not so kind. Versus the open and affirming church, just still have happy memories there. Yeah. But as for just like me more discovering my gender identity, I think the more that I feel like a whole person, the more I'm able to accept and integrate the path that led me here. So I'm still very thankful for my experience in the LDS Church, in that non-denominational Christian church and that UCC church. They're all a part of the history that makes me who I am.
Yes. Because within the Methodists, for me, it's like, okay, so you're a lady. This is how you have to dress. This is how you have to act. This is the way they see you should be. And then as you're a man, this is how you're supposed to look like. This is how you're supposed to be. And before I had started, I hated it. I absolutely hated it because, like, I didn't want to wear those clothes. I didn't want to have to make myself look presentable or like how I should look to them. I just wanted to go, and like if that meant if that meant jeans and a shirt and I look like every other dude that showed up, that was fine. And now that I am the way now that I am transitioning and I'm in my gender, I don't feel comfortable being there because not to say that I'm living a lie because I'm not. I'm true myself, but I'm not man enough to be there. And like, I feel like they would see that. And I was like, so But yeah, so I see that the stereotypes are there between the two genders. I was like, not for me.
Do you feel that your views on religion in general have differed since discovering your gender?
I still really struggle with the concept of religion just because of who I am and how I identify, and how, at least in our American culture, how a lot of religions view trans folks or just queer folks in general as an umbrella term for sexual orientation or sexual anything outside the standard heterosexual cisgendered individuals. What they claim their religious texts say, I think, is kind of why I don't really prescribe to any specific religion. So
yes. Since discovering my gender, yes, it has changed. Because of my gender, that's hard to answer. I'm sure, I'm sure that did play its role in my religious journey in that respect. But I'm not able to connect the dots from my gender to being an atheist.
So figuring out my gender or my gender journey has been one piece of a bunch of stuff that has come together to shape my relationship with religion nowadays. Some of that is studying to be a social worker and or just further meditation and study. But I would say that where I used to think of religion as figuring out your basis for morals, for the rightness versus wrongness of the world and how to live your life, I now much more see it as one aspect of how people figure out their sense of meaning and purpose in life. That morals and rightness and wrongness can be a very strong part of that. But I try to think much more holistically about it now. Of just, I don't know, I hesitate to say that it's a tool for figuring that out, but I think it can be used as a tool, a way to facilitate that journey for the people that it works for.
For me, he doesn't care. For me, God doesn't. It's like, all right, you are my child. This is who you are. Not that he made a mistake in making me or my body, but like, I don't see him being like, you're not a man. This is not what I put you in. And so I am just his child, and he will see me and raise me as he feels like it.
Like this episode? Tell someone about it. Have any questions or concerns? Please feel free to send an email to transfieldguide@gmail.com. Also be sure to subscribe to keep up with the latest episodes. Stay safe, and remember, I'm proud of you.